Well, if you've seen the title of the video that obviously this is, that you're going to think it's a bit dramatic, but bear with and I'll explain why I think England is lost. That's not to say that I'm giving up on anything, but just bear with. So I went back to a job that I was at about 7 or 9 years ago. I think about nearly 9 years ago. Now, it had a fair amount of foreigners in it then, but just mainly Polish. I've been back since. Oh, and obviously people who look Indian. Now I went back and it's Latvians, Romanians, Polish, many people of dark skin. But the thing is, most of them had really bad English, so they couldn't explain anything to you. Now, when I did see some of them being trained the other day, they were trying to train them to do simple things like lift and carry in a way that wouldn't hurt their back. They couldn't get it. Well, if they can't get that, they're not going to be able to explain to somebody what the problem is. They're not going to be explain where the fire is, etc., etc. So that's one of my problems. The second thing is these big companies and agencies. Now, some of you may or may not be aware of Morrison's in Bridgewater. This is a fine example of how globalism says it's going to do a lot for the local community and then shits on it from the highest height. Now, Morrison's in Bridgewater is a massive, vast place, and they were going to have to recruit lots of staff. So they wanted a deal setting the place up. You know, they wanted every assistance they could from the local council to get it built, get it through, you know, not hold things up, that kind of thing. And they said they would invest in the Bridgewater vision. Sounded great, didn't it, right? What they actually did, because they also bought the land off the farmer saying that they were going to build this and this, and then they're going to build some houses and he'll have something to do with that. And the farmer thought that would be great. What they actually did was shit on the farmer. And from the moment they were building it, they sent the agencies over to Poland and over to Romania to recruit staff and got very little staff from Bridgewater itself. So obviously, the people of Bridgewater weren't too impressed by this. The farmer was not too impressed with us. But moreover, we ended up with a lot more foreign people over here getting used for cheap labour. Now, every week I was in there driving through the agency, a different agency than the one that got the cheap labour in, by the way. And it was at this point I worked it out. But what else I would also see is every week, probably about 30 or 40 new people at the gate about to come in and be inducted, because that's the wastage they had from the people that came in and they worked them really hard and then they just didn't stay around. They buggered off. And who knows where they went at that point, right? But they were in the country now. And it went on. Now, the company that I worked for before is an intermediate. What it does is it picks up food from this company or companies, brings it all together, makes a load out of it, and will take it to somebody else, like as it used to be Tesco's or Asda or whatever. But by the way, they've lost those contracts to either Kalina or they've Romac or Romoff or whatever it is. Anyway, it's a Romanian firm of Romanian drivers that's undercut all British owner drivers, put them out of business, basically. And I don't know how they're running so cheap. I have my suspicions, but I can't say it because of legal reasons. You work it out for yourself. Anyway, so what's happening now is all the owner drivers in Britain are being put out. And what will happen is when they're finished, this company will up the price, which will affect you and me. Now, in the old days, we used to get, because I'm thinking to myself, this had to be a plan for so long. So where I went last night, I saw very few white English-speaking people. And I went to quite a few places. And I went to the countryside, and I went into the cities. And what I've realised is that over the last 9 years, they've been absolutely flooding it with cheap workers, which incidentally also can top their benefits or top their money up with benefits, and that includes child benefit back home to wherever home is. Now, originally, these people did come over and work really hard, but now they're getting clued up because they speak to each other and they organise each other. So they're not getting any more work than you would do out of a British person, but what they are doing is making sure that the wages stay down. And this is what big corporations do. They use the heartstrings of the left about multiculturalism and helping people in poor countries. But what they actually do is invite them over to this country and pay them less than they would pay the people in this country, because the people in this country simply won't work for that. And they know it, and this is why they did it. Now, the left answers, well, the white people are lazy and they won't work. These people will. Yes, they will, because it's more money than what they were used to back there. And when they send this money back, it makes them significantly better off than all the others back there. Okay? So you getting your cheap bananas. And here's the thing, right? The food's been engineered to go wrong as well. I don't know if any of you notice that potatoes nowadays, you try and cook with potatoes. You want a decent roast potato, it's hard, it starts going dark. I bought these the other day. Look at the colour of them, right? They're going black. They went from green to black. Huh? What's that about? The quality of our food these days is shit. All of this stuff at the moment is being engineered. We've been taken over by foreigners, right? And we're being run into the ground with taxes, and the quality of our food has been engineered to be worse, much worse. There is something or somebody or some organisation or whatever that's got it in for us out there. They don't like us very much. Now, the left are going to go, oh, he's a conspiracy theory. The only good thing I know about this is when it all goes wrong, I'll be suffering, but you'll be there with me. And I will be able to look at you and say, I told you so, for what that's worth. And then when you're screaming and shouting about how upset and how bad it is and why I didn't do anything, well, there'll be no law and order there, so that'll be good then as well. But the problem we have now is that unless something spectacular comes along, then these people will remain here and more likely outbreed us. So where does that leave us in the future? Well, it's pretty black. That's the truth. Now, I'm thinking what would be nice is have a live stream, get your opinions about this particular topic. So I will do a live stream pretty much shortly after this goes out. I don't know how long this is going to take, but I just didn't realize the depths of it and how bad it was. So last night I was on the road and I'm starting to run out of hours. So I phoned the office. Firstly, I get some camp thing that speaks a different language that did not have any idea about where I was, no geographical knowledge, couldn't get up anything on the computer to tell me where I was because we're allegedly tracked, but it's only when it doesn't actually work in your favour, then it can't help you. And the language barrier was so bad that they were useless to me, and I started getting a little bit pissy. And they were telling me that I was going to have to find the services, didn't matter how long I went over my hours, because they have to secure the load. That's not my problem. And I don't want to break the law. And it was, what pissed me off is that if we'd have had a local person with some local knowledge, they'd probably been on the road, and I know I'm dreaming a bit here, they would have said, look, I know where you are, head down to this part, there is a place there, you could stop. So I'm flapping a bit now, okay, and I'm getting close to 15 hours. Anyway, I managed, by hook nor crook, to get back into the yard with 30 seconds spare. But it made me realise that this woke company that's all about safety is all a front. It's very clueless. The company that I was working for during the lockdown, when drivers were a bit short and they actually had to step up to the mark and pay, they went berserk. They don't want to pay us money. They want to rip us off. They're not fucking interested. So what did they do? They sent it over to Bulgaria for drivers. And I said this in one of my other live streams. But they sent it over to Bulgaria for drivers, and they brought shed loads of them back here and put them in a hotel, and they thought they'd beaten the driver shortage, beaten the driver crisis. Fuck them drivers. We're not paying them that rate. We'll go around. We'll get some other people that will work for less. Well, what happened? Well, they didn't take into account that to pass the test over there is as easy as picking up almost a knife and fork. You've got to get a tractor and a trailer, and as long as you can drive it around the block, you haven't even got to reverse it. You do have now an articulated vehicle license, right? Which is kind of worrying given the fact that they can then drive something of 44 ton out on the roads next to us when they haven't got any experience of driving that particular vehicle, no great driver skills, and also a lower IQ, because that's also a problem too. So half of them won't speak the language, half of them won't understand the vehicle, half of them won't have any idea about road safety over here because our roads are very different to the roads in Romania. Well, anyway, what happened? Every one of them failed the driver assessment, and the driver assessors were terrified. Some of them let us tell them to stop there and then and switch over. But this is the globalist company's idea of how to keep the worker at low wages. Go abroad and get some cheap labour. Now, ethically speaking, that's wrong. You're going to bring people into this country, you pay them the rate that all other people in this country will work for. Otherwise, you're using them. But it's not something that the globalists actually care about, because to be a globalist, you have to be a psychopath. And it seems there's a fair few of them. Actually, they were running short and they were wondering where they were going to get more of these people from. So they ended up having to recruit them from some of the most bizarre places, but that's a video for another time. But last night was an indication to me, and I was meant to go back in today. I realised by my dislike of what's happening to my country, it would manifest possibly at work by me saying something that I would probably end up regretting. Not just the fact that I only got 5 hours kip. I told them around the job, forget it. But it also makes me wonder, was that agency, the one I was dealing with, complicit with going abroad and finding this cheap labour? I said before, I should say, there were people that said, I won't employ British workers. They're unreliable. The truth of it was, they won't employ British workers because they won't have the piss taken out of them. They know what they're worth. They know their rights. And they're going to be more militant. The British know I'm worth this much an hour. All right? And you're not going to get my lifeblood out of me for that. Because it's essentially what wages are is buying a part of your life and your hard work and wear and tear on your body. That's what it is. It's nothing different. So we know that our body has only a set amount of work in it, that if you beast it to death, that later on down the road, we'll suffer for that. We also know that if you buy this life now, these hours, these 60 hours a week or 50 hours a week, they're never going to come back. We're never going to get that time back. And if we spend 60 hours a week miserable and shit job, then we expect to be financially rewarded for that. But no, globalism works out that it pulls people in from another country that were used to far worse conditions, and they will work hard, maybe too hard. They will put up with shit, bad conditions, whatever else. And they'll turn up because they're now living the dream. I remember that during the 80s, we buggered off to Germany, our builders, and helped. There was a massive building purge over there. And we went over there. We were no different to what they did here. There was even a a documentary, make it even a drama. You can tell I've only had 5 hours kit, called Our Wiedersehen Pet, which was basically about the lads at the Rickies that went over there. But it is, fortunately, a situation where now we have so many of these people in our country in all these positions, in all the factories, on the building sites, all the blue-collar jobs, I guess. That's the terminology for them. But are they ever going to go back? At what point will they go back? Or will it be when it gets so bad over here? But here's the other thing that I hadn't thought about, but we probably should. There were many people that came from countries like India and Africa back in the 50s that saw Great Britain as a bastion of hope. It was a nice country. We had rules, ethics, morals, manners, etc. And the theory was that if you worked hard, you could do well. And that was the theory back then. And a lot of these people left Africa or India because they wanted something different. Will you imagine how these people feel now, X amount of years later, if they're still alive, or even their kids, that they now live in somewhere so concentrated with the people that they try to get away from that it is literally like Africa or India, but just wet and cold. I should imagine they're not too pleased. But the other thing we should take on board is when you take people out of a country that looks run down and all the rest of it, you could blame the state for this. You could blame all sorts. But there was I think it was a Chinese guy that was over in some part of wherever it was, Africa or whatever. And he was speaking to the guy. He said, basically, you and I were colonized and they left us at the same time. Now, our country's gone forward and yours has gone back. And he used the example of the infrastructure of the railways had dilapidated, other services had gone down, law and order had got worse. The living environment they lived in was much, much worse, and etc. And he said, you know why? And this is his words, not mine. He said, you're lazy. That's your problem. And it was like, wow. And it took a Chinese man to say that, because if I'd have said it, I'd get called racist, obviously, because I'm still pale male. But when you take people who live in an environment which is much worse than yours, and you bring them wholesale over here, how do you think it's going to work? Do you think they're going to step up to the new living conditions and decide that's a great idea, hygiene, law and order, and everything else, and keep everything tidy and clean, all the rest of it, and everything be beautiful? And You know, the way that they had to defend themselves back home, you know, with the machetes and stuff like that, none of that's going to come with them. Well, if you think that, then you're about as deluded as you can be. But don't worry. All you've got to do is walk the streets of London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, or any other major city, right? And go into the areas which actually you probably won't be allowed in. But go in there anyway because you don't believe in that, right? And when you go in there, if you make it out, well done, congrats. But you will actually have had your eyes open. It was like a friend of mine that went over, or his brother went over to Africa to build wells because he was a lefty. And they went over there, slogged guts out, built wells, and they went back 3 weeks later to make sure everything was going all right. The well had been stripped of all the bits that could be stripped they sold them so they could buy guns. It was at that point that that man went from rather left to rather right. I wish that we could literally pick these deluded fuckwits up that believe all of this shit and put them in somewhere in the UK that is so terrible, right? And give them a life experience that maybe will jolt their stupidity. And some of them will still come back and blame us for this, at which point there's no helping them because these people are far beyond common sense. They're mentally ill. But many of them will actually see the truth. They'll see how these people detest them, don't like the culture, don't like the country, but want to take it over for some reason. Problem is, the bigger the numbers, the more everything will go downhill. And also, I suppose that when you've got all of these people over here that are used to very little, then councils and etc. won't have to make the same amount of effort they used to in the old days. Take, for instance, our roads. Yesterday, where I went, which was near all these industrial estates, the roads were like something of a track over in Africa or India. I was absolutely gobsmacked. Because bear in mind, I'm moving thousands of pounds worth of product on the back of this vehicle in a vehicle that's worth, I don't know, 150 grand. And we're going over potholes and bits of road that's missing that, you know, it's a new road as well, for God's sakes. But the road qualities in the UK are going down, and there's many other qualities of everything that's going down. And I can't help but notice that these people will probably just put up with it, take it for, well, whatever, it's what it is. Whereas we used to, we don't anymore, kick off about it. You know, I'm paying road tax for this. I pay, if you've got a 4x4 and you've got a newer one, you're paying hundreds of pounds of road tax. Well, that should have gone together to fix this. Or did that money go on? I don't know. But then we ended up with speed cameras everywhere, fining us and all the rest of it. Surely that money should have helped with the fixing of roads and stuff like that. But it doesn't, does it? It doesn't go anywhere near there. What I'm saying is we're buggered. And I'm trying to work out where we go from here. And the only thing I can think is that when this country turns to the third world shithole that it's heading for, and law and order's gone, and there's no money to be rinsed out of the benefit system anymore, then a lot of them will go. They'll go back to wherever it was they came from or go on to the next place. Much like locusts do when they've finished a field full of crop, they'll go to the next one. That's what they do. But the people that have come over here to use this system, the benefit system, the kindness and generosity of British people, they will, if there's nothing left to have, many of them will just move on to the next place because they don't love the place, no interest in the place, so who cares? And at that point, they'll be left with a hardcore, and the hardcore are the ones that want to change it into an Islamic country. That will be the next problem. And what we do with that, I don't know. Probably by which time we'll be in our 15-minute cities where we won't be able to go out, protest, or say anything. And at that point, we're going to have a 1989 Berlin Wall scenario where nothing to lose, everything to gain kind of thing. Well, why we have to get to that stage now, why people cannot say what they think, why they delude themselves that what they're seeing isn't happening, and everything's great because the BBC told me so or whoever. I detest those people. I detest them more than the people that have come, right? The ones that come and use this place and turn it into a hole and do all terrible things. But we're knackered. Multiculturalism is our strength. That was probably one of the biggest lies. Next time, I promise I won't come in your mouth. Right? It is what it is. I'm so pleased that my grandfathers couldn't see this. And I'm ashamed that it was my generation and also his kids' generation that helped fuck this up for their own self-greed, narcissism, and all the other horrible things that man has. Man has many good qualities, but the bad qualities have helped get us where we are. Now, many of you say we weren't asked. No, you weren't. But when it did happen, you didn't kick off either. Now, there's a lot of people watching this that probably have kicked off, because if you're watching this, you're more likely to have been the sort of person that did go a bit bonkers. But for the main amount of people out there, they just sat on their hands. Not my problem. Not in my backyard. I'll be dead by the time this happens. It won't matter. And that's a lefty trope. I just don't get it. How could you be okay that when it goes wrong, you won't be around? So it's all right to fuck up the next generation, is it? And surely you've got kids. And what about when they have kids? But this is how self-centered they are. They pretend to love everything, but they don't even love their kids enough to hand over a world that's good. They're happy to leave their kids a world where they're going to be in danger. I can't get it. I seriously can't get how these people think, but whatever. Anyway, I'm going to do a live stream about this. What's the time now? 2:00. If this is edited in time. So 2:00 UK time. We'll see what people think.